other preventable chronic conditions. Without taking action today, the obesity crisis among children will be tomorrow's surge of chronically ill adults. And the costs associated with treating and managing these diseases will climb to unfathomable heights, which we will all shoulder. By targeting the biggest culprit among obesity trends with a small excise tax, the revenues created from AB 669 will be used to exclusively combat childhood obesity by providing needed resources to local schools, community-based nutrition, and state wellness programs. We can improve our children's lives and significantly reduce the amount Californians will be paying for treating chronic diseases in the future. It is my intent that AB 669 would increase the cost of sugary drinks with the tax being passed along to the consumer and putting their cost on par with beverages that are healthful. By increasing the cost of sugary drinks, my ultimate goal is to change the behavior of those consuming these beverages, similar to what has been achieved through the implementation of increased taxes on cigarettes. Additionally, the dedicated funding source for comprehensive childhood obesity prevention is intended to be similar to how California's tax on cigarette funds leads to important abatement efforts. With money collected from the sweetened beverage tax, we will be able to start reversing obesity trends and do the things we know we should be doing to ensure that our children are healthy. We cannot afford to sit by while the childhood obesity crisis overwhelms our healthcare system and shortens our children's lives. We are all paying the costs of bad health trends in our state. We need to take action. A tax on sugary drinks is not a cure-all, but it can be a valuable tool in a broader public health campaign. Here to testify are Dr. Harold Goldstein of the California Center for Public Health Advocacy and Dr. Karen Hart of the American Heart Association, an advocate with that organization. Members, I respectfully will ask for your aye vote, and Mr. Chair would like to present the witnesses in support at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Please present.
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Dr. Harold Goldstein. I'm the Executive Director of the California Center for Public Health Advocacy, the proud sponsor of this bill. As the Assemblyman mentioned, we are in the midst of a dire obesity epidemic. In my adult lifetime, since 1985, obesity rates have skyrocketed in California from 9%, less than 9% in 1985, to almost 26% today. Two-thirds of Californians are currently overweight, including more than a quarter of California kids. And in the midst of this epidemic, we're obviously all facing massive budget deficits as well. Education and health programs have already been cut and are slated for additional cuts just at the time when these programs are needed the most. All over the country, cities and states are considering soda taxes. There are half a dozen cities and states that already have soda taxes. About a dozen are currently considering additional taxes, excise taxes equal to what this bill would do, a penny per ounce, that would raise $1.7 billion here in California. We just recently, just last week, released a study showing that 85% of the tax revenue from this bill would go straight to the local level, to California schools and to California communities to pay for the education and health programs that our kids need, the after-school programs, the sports programs, the healthy food and physical education programs in California schools. $1.2 billion straight to California schools, and $300 million to California communities. Even in the midst of what is arguably one of the most anti-tax seasons of all times, the large majority of Californians support this tax. 56% of Californians support this tax, and 60% of low-income Californians support it. This is a lot of money to local folks, including folks in your own districts. $370 million to Los Angeles County, $43 million to Fresno County, $63 million to Santa Clara County. We strongly encourage your support of this bill.
Turn the microphone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Dr. Kitty Hart.
I am a board-certified family medicine physician in private practice in Sacramento and a volunteer with the American Heart Association, and we are pleased to support this bill. As you have heard, and it bears repeating, childhood obesity has become an epidemic. Since 1980, the number of obese children in the United States has more than tripled. And according to the CDC, obesity now rivals as the largest cause of preventable disease and death. The health consequences of this are staggering. Recent research shows that an obese child's arteries resemble those of a middle-aged adult. If the current obesity trends are not reversed, it is predicted that 1 in 3 children and nearly half of Latino and African American children born in the year 2000 will develop type 2 diabetes. The health consequences associated with that condition are staggering as well. As a physician in private practice, I am acutely aware of the impact of the obesity epidemic. In fact, nearly 65% of my private practice are either overweight or obese. And I am frequently surprised when I come across a patient who has a normal body weight. Most of these individuals are at increased risk of diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And of those individuals who are in fact diagnosed with diabetes, heart disease, and stroke conditions associated with obesity, the care associated with managing these conditions and the healthcare costs associated with treating these conditions increases exponentially. For most of these individuals, dietary intake is the reason for the obesity, an aspect of which are sugar-sweetened beverages. Sugar-sweetened beverages are the largest single source of added sugars in the United States diet and is associated with increased risk for high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes and stroke and other conditions as well. In the last 30 years, the average American's daily caloric intake has increased by 300 calories, and 43% of those additional calories come from soda consumption. Children and adolescents derive nearly 15% of their total calories from sugar-sweetened beverages. By imposing a modest tax on these beverages, we will be able to fund programs aimed to help local schools and communities implement effective strategies to keep our children active and healthy. Passage of this bill is a key step to address our state's epidemic by funding obesity prevention programs and simultaneously decrease consumption of a product that has clearly been linked to poor health outcomes and increased healthcare costs. These costs have resulted in increased individual costs as well as public costs. The American Heart Association believes this bill will undoubtedly decrease the incidence of diabetes, improve health outcomes, improve quality of life, save lives, and reduce the cost of health care, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Morgan on behalf of the American Heart Association and Stroke Association in support.
Beth Capel on behalf of California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, also in support. Obesity is an epidemic that hits the communities of color in this state hardest. One additional fact, CalPERS estimates that 75 to 80% of their healthcare costs are correlated with obesity, costs from conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. So this is the beginning. This bill will be a modest step in reducing those costs.
Thank you. And if I may ask after Mr. Riley, if we can just state name and position, be appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Riley with the California Academy of Family Physicians. I urge your support. This ties the societal cost of children getting old people diseases back to the source of that cost and returns it to the local community.
Kathy Mossberg, representing the California Food Policy Advocates, in support.
Eric Manke with the California Association of Food Banks, in support.
Chad Silva on behalf of Latino Coalition for a Healthy California, in support.
Lily Baird on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlixon. We have a supportive amend on this bill, and we ask for your aye vote so we can continue to work with the author's office. Thank you.
Ms. Short with Children Now, in support.
Ida Farad with Central Valley Health Network, representing over 100 federally qualified health centers, in support.
Jamila Iris Edwards with the California Primary Care Association, representing 800 nonprofit community clinics and health centers in California in strong support.
Nicole Wortelman on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in support.
Michael Radigan on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, Santa Clara County, here in support.
Ryan Spencer on behalf of California Medical Association in support.
Don Collins, Commissioner of Athletics for the San Francisco School District and the CIF San Francisco section, in support.
Thank you. Any testimony in opposition to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mira Girton here today on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce in opposition to this bill. As a threshold issue, we oppose targeted taxes aimed at a specific industry because, particularly during a recession period like the one that we're in, they tend to have the biggest impact on jobs in those industries, and we believe that when revenue increases are necessary, they should be broad-based, low-rate, and temporary to help spread the pain amongst the most number of groups as possible. In addition, we typically oppose taxes that are used to regulate conduct because they will inevitably have unintended consequences on the industry, also affecting jobs. But in particular, we have concerns with AB 669 because we believe it has conflicting goals. If it succeeds at one, it will fail at the other. So to the extent that it's trying to both provide program funding for obesity and children's education, if it succeeds and at that, then it means it has failed to curb conduct. And if it curbs conduct, then it will create a declining revenue source for those programs, which will in the future create new budgetary requirements for the state, which we believe is one of the ways that we've gotten into the problems that we're having today. So for those reasons, we oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to take one quick minute here to establish a quorum, if we could.
Perea, Donnelly, Bell, Calderon, Cedillo, Fuentes, Gordon, Harkey, Nestande.
Here. Thank you. Please, who's ever next?
Mr. Chair and members, Bob Ackerman on behalf of the California Nevada Soft Drink Association. We are bottlers of a variety of non-alcoholic beverages. As you might expect, we're very much opposed to this legislation. We think it's inappropriate to single out one product among the array of food and beverages that people consume. We do agree that there's an issue here to address, but we think it's better addressed not by targeting one beverage in this process, but by using education and information available to consumers. The industry's been at the forefront of labeling in terms of more information available to consumers. The Clear on Calories initiative now is rolled out in California across the country that basically will provide front-of-pack labeling, front-of-package labeling on the vending machine when you go to select the beverage of your choice. It will be stated in the calories per 12-ounce serving for each of those choices available to you, as well as when you go to your favorite restaurant and go out and fill up your cup with a beverage, again, of your choice. We'll list the calories per 12-ounce serving. More awareness on behalf of the public, I think, is the solution to this. The data that Mr. Monning cites is probably a little bit old in terms of the array of beverages now available in the marketplace, everything from full calorie to mid-calorie to low calorie to no calorie. That is the appropriate way to address the obesity issue. Calories in, calories out, and the need for exercise. And that's the more appropriate approach than singling out one product in the food and beverage change. Soft drinks are taxed already in California, unlike other food and beverage products. Carbonated soft drinks are subject to sales tax, also subject to a CRV of a nickel per 12-ounce container. If you add this small tax, which is about $3 per case of 24 containers, this is a huge tax. It would have a big impact on our companies and the employees that are part of our distribution process. So for that reason, we are opposed.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Lisa Caddick, who's a dietitian as well.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. As Bob said, my name's Lisa Caddick. I'm a consultant based in Washington, D.C. I am here on behalf of the beverage industry today. I want to start out by saying I've spent a good bit of my career, which is almost 20 years, trying to find ways to combat the problem of obesity. If it were simple and fixable in a short period of time, I'm confident that we would have already seen rates drop dramatically. So I think we can all agree it's certainly a serious problem, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. If our goal is to address obesity, then I think it's really important to educate consumers about how many calories they're taking in. I think it's something that we've really gotten away from over the last several years when we tend to focus on one particular sector of the food supply. And we need them to understand how to balance that with what they are expending. I'll tell you that in this country, we have dismal figures when it comes to leisure time activity and as well as regular physical activity. It's been reported that 40% of adults report no leisure time activity at all, and 30% of adults are getting the regular, moderate, or vigorous physical activity that's required on a daily basis. So those numbers are pretty dismal. Looking at NHANES data, which is the Nutrition, Health, and Examination Survey, it's government data, asked Americans what and how often they eat and drink from all foods and beverage categories, from all the food and beverage categories. They looked at an analysis which was conducted by scientists from the National Cancer Institute and found that nearly 93% of our calories come from something other than soft drinks. If we look at production data of the whole non-alcoholic beverage sector, calories per ounce decreased from 9 calories per ounce to about 6 calories per ounce between 1988 and 2008. So this represents a near 25% decrease in calories per ounce produced over the past 20 years. Bottled water volume has tripled. You've probably heard this. It's one of the fastest, it is the fastest growing category in the beverage sector. Yet again, over that same time period, I think we have to remember that obesity rates have continued to go up. Over the past 20 years, the beverage industry has continued to diversify its products, as Bob mentioned. As a dietitian, I go to conferences all the time. I see more and more and more offerings of products all the time, which we're always pleased to see. Whether it be a no-calorie, low-calorie, or even different portion sizes, we're seeing a lot more often. If we continue to focus on simplistic solutions to the obesity problem, I think we're going to fail to solve the problem. It is complex. It's certainly calories in, calories out, but I think we really need to get down to education. We need to help families have access to resources and help parents understand how to work with their families and kids to, again, balance their calorie intake. Bob mentioned the Clear on Calories initiative. Something that in my career I thought I'd never see was what the industry did in schools. With respect to the school beverage guidelines, you probably are well aware that they teamed up with the Clinton Foundation and the American Heart Association to voluntarily remove all full-calorie soft drinks from schools. It was pretty astounding in my profession to see this. Dietitians were very pleased and really applauded the industry for doing that. We've now seen, after their implementation for 3 years, a decrease of calories in schools by about 88%. So I think it's too soon to tell what this is going to show, if anything, about reducing rates, but clearly it's a great step in the right direction. I'll wrap up and say that addressing obesity in our country, I think we need to look more broadly than at soft drinks. An example I can also use is back in the 80s when we tended to focus only on fat. We said that was the most important thing. People then switched to other foods that didn't contain a lot of fat, and we still continue to get fat. So I think we really have to be careful about singling out particular nutrients or foods in the food supply. There's no silver bullet to this solution. It's comprehensive. Everybody has a role to play. And we encourage the legislator to reject this bill and not single out soft drinks solely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Matt Sutton with the California Restaurant Association. We are opposed as well. Obesity, no doubt, is a tremendously important issue, and it's one that we think deserves a comprehensive solution and a comprehensive discussion in the appropriate policy committee. As for the discriminatory tax on a single product in this bill, obviously in the restaurant industry, we're serving these products. We don't have any problem with the products. We do think they should be used as part of a balanced diet, and when you get to the taxation piece, restaurants in a good economy, every dollar that comes in, 3 to 5 cents is the profit margin. That's in a good economy. We're certainly not there now. Many restaurants are barely hanging on. And while it may not be this one issue, it's the cumulative impact of all these cost increases that does cause a lot of pain for a restaurateur. And you can say that this would just be passed on to the consumer. You can only mark up food so much, and it doesn't make sense to do it after a certain point, and you won't do it. And that comes back out of the restaurateur. And so the discriminatory nature of the tax, the economic impact, and the overall approach we do object to.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, John Latimer on behalf of the California Retailers Association. I won't repeat the arguments relative to the obesity question, although we certainly concur with the points from the Beverage Association. Our members are both sellers and manufacturers, in many cases private label manufacturers of sweetened beverages. We have consistently opposed single product targeted taxes. Our industry has been willing to accept in the past and has supported in the past broad-based taxes such as sales taxes in order to address the larger underlying budget complication or budget difficulty that we're all in. We don't think singling out a single product, this one or any other, is the right approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Chris McKaylee on behalf of the California Grocers Association, also opposed with its targeted tax increase. Thank you.
Please state your name and position on the bill, please.
Mr. Chair, members, Ralph Simone representing the Grocery Manufacturers Association in strong opposition.
Judy Hughes with the California League of Food Processors in opposition.
Kate Bell with the California Automatic Vendors Council, also in opposition.
And Mr. Chairman, members, David Wolf here with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association in opposition.
Thank you. Any other testimony in opposition to the bill? Okay, questions from the members? Ms. Harkey?
Yeah, aren't we currently thinking of diverting a cigarette tax for general fund purposes?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will say with respect to that point, one of the speakers argued that if we succeed in the objective, we fail in generating the revenue designed by this bill. I think it's a false argument. The tobacco tax has resulted in a reduction of the consumption of tobacco products in California. Medical journals have done peer-reviewed studies of the impact of a sweetened beverage tax correlating to a reduction in consumption, and this bill also provides a resource for schools and communities to continue with the education in advancing. Just another point, the reason that the added sweeteners are targeted, and people say, well, today it's this, tomorrow it's hamburgers, the next day it's French fries. There is little or no nutritional value in soda drinks, and yet it is identified as the leading cause of increased caloric intake by young people.
I don't doubt what you're saying about the caloric intake, but my problem is I seriously don't see how you get people to go back to drinking water again. To me, it's amazing, but parents buy the sodas. They're available at the school. I think people are becoming more and more aware of the non-sugar aspect, but that being said, if we're going to be implementing safe routes to school and then try to implement, again, a mandate for practical nutrition in the school when we can't seem to teach people to read, which would be very, very helpful for them to educate themselves, or to do math calculations, I don't know how we're going to be adding all this extra curriculum. I understand your intent, but I do think we divert funds from these special funds all the time. And I think the schools have a heavy load, and to have to implement these other aspects of the curriculum would be difficult. And also, I think parents need to step up, and they're just not. And we didn't have sodas in the house, and it was a special treat. Simply for that reason. And my mother, we weren't very happy about it, but that being said, once in a while we got a little Kool-Aid, but that was about it. We didn't have the money for all this stuff. And I think it's a function of the school lunch programs and the school eating programs and everything else that's gone on over time. And I really think we need to get the parents back involved rather than trying to limit the consumption through a tax. I think that's just going to hit them in the pocketbooks.
Well, I appreciate your concerns. I grew up in the same era. Unfortunately, now we have larger delivery vessels. When we were kids, it was an 8 fluid ounce bottle. Now it's a 20 fluid ounce bottle. The pricing of these beverages in supermarkets is less than an equivalent amount of bottled water. So when you talk about water being one of the more healthful beverages, these less healthful and actually dangerous beverages are priced lower on the shelves of the supermarkets.
Oh, that's one more thing I'd like to bring up is the bottled water concept. We used to have drinking fountains, and they were readily available. They don't seem to be anymore, and no one seems to be able to drink from the tap, and I think that's a shame. I actually drink from the hose at the horse stables because, and I'm still standing. So, I mean, I don't understand why we don't put these types of implements, the water fountains, back in the schools and let people drink from them.
Well, you raised the concern of putting a burden on the schools having to figure out how to spend the money that would be generated from this. One of the problems that leads to obesity is schools have cut physical education programs. This money could be used to restore physical education. As the dietitian said, there's no single cure. It requires a comprehensive approach. A key to that is physical education. The tax generated by this non-nutritional beverage would support restoring physical education in our schools. I think that would be a good starting point.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Okay. Any other questions? And I appreciate you bringing the bill forward, but I do have some of the concerns that Ms. Harkin and other people expressed, that the calories in this can of apple cranberry are more than the calories in a can of Coke. So it really is a measure of, as I think we all agree, more physical education, more awareness on the part of parents and so forth. But
I'll compare the added sweeteners in my bottle to the added sweeteners.
This gives you more more nutrition for sure. But the calories, as people say, calories in, calories out. And no other comments. And this is a suspense item, Mr. Monning. So we will it'll be held until next month. I believe.
And if I could just close briefly by thanking the committee for this opportunity to present this. I appreciate your patience and consideration, and I urge you to help bring this off suspense and give our children a chance not to have adult lives plagued with diabetes, heart disease, and other preventable diseases. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Dickinson, but you have AB 261.
Of course.
Two questions I wrote that he made.
Please present, Mr. Dickinson.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you. I have before you today AB 261, which has to do with tax lien sales, and arises out of a case that occurred here in Sacramento County during my tenure as a member of the Board of Supervisors. I'm not going to describe to you what happened, because we've had some extensive discussions in the last few days with the committee staff about the bill, so I think it's really, as we propose it to you today and would suggest amending it on the floor, become fairly simple. And that is, it does now, we're proposing two things. It would clarify existing law by specifying that established prescriptive easements will run with a property, even if the property is sold or otherwise transferred. This is declarative, essentially, of what currently exists in law, but it is confusing to people, especially when there's a tax lien sale, because obviously the county becomes engaged in that sale as opposed to a typical seller-buyer transaction. The second thing that we would do is require that anyone who wishes to file a legal action against a county to overturn a tax lien sale would first be required to petition the Board of Supervisors, and then if the board denies that petition, an aggrieved person could go to court. That is consistent with the principle of exhaustion of administrative remedies. We shouldn't encourage litigation before the administrative authority has had a chance to address any grievances that a party may have. So those are what we're proposing to do in terms of this bill at this point. And I've got a couple witnesses here who can speak to that.
I would like to move the bill.
Second.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Karen Lang on behalf of the California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors. They've been seeking some relief in this area of the law for a few years. We believe that this will strengthen the law. It puts the law on the side of a person who does hold a prescriptive easement on a property that's sold, for example, that easement being their driveway. It would be tremendously helpful. We urge your aye vote. And I have Cynthia Gibbs here from the Sacramento County Treasurer Tax Collector's Office, who's quite an expert in the mundane details of the bill, and would ask your aye vote. Thank you.
And I'm Cynthia Gibbs. I'm the Assistant Tax Collector with Sacramento County, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there any witnesses in opposition to the bill?
Not aware of any opposition.
Okay.
Should have said that. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
Oh, that's quite all right. There's already been a motion and a second. They beat you to it. But any questions from any members?
I just want to know.
Yes, Ms. Harkey.
Are there amendments being taken that clarify a few issues?
Yes, but we didn't have time since the conversations have gone up literally to this morning to get them in front of you in writing today. So
Will it come before appropriations? No?
No, it's not.
This is it? Okay.
Yeah, and I think you did address the easement issue. I think was a issue of concern for a lot of folks. So with your amendments, then you would say if you have a prescriptive easement on the property, you then have a.
It runs. First of all, it runs with the land. We make that declarative statement. Secondly, what the prescriptive easement holder would have to do, if that person felt aggrieved by a sale, just as anyone else would who felt aggrieved, is they'd have to go to the Board of Supervisors and ask them to overturn the tax lien sale. They'd essentially have to exhaust their administrative remedies. In the case that occurred here in Sacramento County, the party that asserted that they held a prescriptive easement, it was unrecorded, simply filed suit. And so
before going to the board?
That's right. The county had no chance to address the situation administratively before it found itself in court bearing the costs of defense. And we're trying to reduce litigation, reduce costs to counties.
Well, I appreciate it, and I trust the amendments will come forward. I'll vote for it with knowing those amendments are coming forward.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Clerk, please call the roll. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Motion is due pass as amended. Perea, Donnelly, Bell, Bell I, Calderon, Cedillo, Cedillo I, Fuentes, Fuentes I, Gordon,
Aye.
Gordon I, Harkey, Harkey I, Nestande,
Aye.
Nestande I.
Bill's out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Alejo, AB 902. Please present when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm here today to present AB 902, a bill that sets right an imbalance in the law that is causing counties to absorb costs that should be the responsibility of delinquent taxpayers. AB 902 is sponsored by the California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors, and the bill removes a hard dollar cap on two specified fees for service that tax collectors provide. Currently, tax collectors are limited by law to collecting $100 for the cost of making a personal contact when a property is at risk of going to tax sale. Oftentimes, and especially in rural areas, the cost of making that personal contact far exceeds $100. Because of the cap, the large counties such as Inyo County might spend as much as $2,000 in transportation and staff costs for a single personal contact, yet only $100 is reimbursable. That means that they have to pay $1,900 out of their budget. Urban counties can be hurt too. San Francisco County makes contact about 20 times and loses an average of $2,000 a year. Fresno County reports losing $50 per contact and expects to lose $2,050 this year. This measure will authorize a tax collector, after a rigorous cost study by the county auditor and approval by a board of supervisors, to set a personal contact fee at an amount that provides for cost recovery to the tax collector. The majority of all fees and charges imposed by the treasurer tax collector in the billing and collection enforcement of property taxes are established and approved by the Board of Supervisors under Government Code Section 54985 and allow the treasurer tax collector to recover actual expenditures. By allowing this measure today, the committee would be helping to conform this section of law to most others that generally govern how fees are set. I have with me today Cynthia Gibbs, Assistant Tax Collector with Sacramento County, and Lori Guidotti, Tax Department Manager with San Luis Obispo County's Treasurer Tax Collector's Office. So thank you for being here.
Move the bill.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Would you like to go ahead and give us your testimony? If you can try to keep it to about 2 minutes.
Sure. My name's Lori Guidotti. I'm the Tax Department Manager for San Luis Obispo County Tax Collector's Office. And the purpose of the proposed code changes is not to raise revenue, but these changes will instead enhance the level of service that we are able to provide and protect the property owner and lien holders from losing their property rights to tax sale. The first proposed change addresses the amount the tax collector may charge for personal service to a taxpayer at risk for losing their home to tax sale. The cost varies by county based on the efforts and staffing of each county. The San Luis Obispo County Tax Collector's Office estimates that their actual and reasonable cost of providing personal service to homeowners subject to the power of sale is $180, based upon the approximately 140 minutes of staff time that are required to make the personal service. This is a combination of time for 2 staff members. Our estimated fee does not take into account the travel expenses incurred for trips that may be in excess of 100 miles round trip, or the research that is done above and beyond what is considered normal for the average site visit. In our county, we make the attempt to contact homeowners prior to the property even becoming 5 years tax defaulted, in an effort to avoid the need of a personal service prior to the sale. If the property becomes subject to tax sale, we attempt to work with the homeowner and their lien holders to ensure that the property is redeemed prior to the personal service being necessary. If it is necessary to provide personal service, this service is made by members of the tax collector staff so that questions can be answered and issues identified. The second proposed change addresses the amount the tax collector may charge for locating and noticing parties of interest with a property subject to tax sale. Again, the cost varies by county based on the efforts and staffing of each county. The San Luis Obispo County Tax Collector's Office estimates that the actual and reasonable cost of locating and notifying parties of interest for properties subject to the power of sale is $164. Approximately 127 minutes of staff time is required to locate all parties of interest per assessment. Our estimate is again based upon what is normal for the average property, and does not
if you could wrap up, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
By allowing for the actual and reasonable cost of personally serving the tax defaulted property owner and noticing parties of interest, the tax collector will have a better opportunity to make contact and allow property owners and lien holders to redeem the property prior to sale.
Great. Thank you very much. Next witness, and if you can speak up to the mic, that'd be great.
It's Cynthia Gibbs, Assistant Tax Collector in Sacramento County. These are mandated regulations that the tax collector must do these services, and we are not able to recover the actual cost of conducting these services. And with the increase of security issues, we can no longer let one person go out to these properties by themselves. The automobile expenses and gasoline to be able to travel and go to all of these homes, it has just become very cost prohibitive, but it's mandated, so we are not able to recover our costs.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, Jean Hurst on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. I'll sound like a broken record here. When our fees aren't sufficient to cover the costs associated with these types of mandated services, that means the general taxpayer is essentially subsidizing the service to the property owner. We think that's inappropriate. There are protections in the Constitution, particularly after Prop 26 passed, that make it clear that counties are only authorized to charge fees to cover reasonable costs. We urge your aye vote.
Thank you.
Karen Lang on behalf of the California Association of County Treasurer Tax Collectors, the County of San Luis Obispo, and the County of Fresno in support. Want to assure the members that there's a very rigorous fee setting process that goes on at counties. This is not a spitball approach. The auditor, controller, the treasurer, tax collector all participate in developing a fee structure, and the Board of Supervisors has to approve it before it's set. So there is a lot of accountability associated with setting the fee, and we urge your aye vote today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support?
Michael Radigan on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, Santa Clara County, here in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses here in support? See none. Any witnesses in opposition? See none. Mr. Alejo, would you like to close?
Mr. Chairman and members, this bill is about fairness and ensuring that during these hard economic times that our counties are not having to pick up the slack for delinquent taxpayers, and ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? No, seeing none. This is a vote bill. We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Motion is due pass. Perea.
Aye.
Perea, aye. Donnelly.
No.
Donnelly, no. Bell. Bell, aye. Calderon. Cedillo. Fuentes. Fuentes, aye. Gordon. Gordon, aye. Harkey. Harkey, no. Nestande.
Calderon, aye.
Calderon, aye.
The bill is out. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have item number 6, AB 820 from Assemblymember Gordon. Mr. Gordon, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. County assessors, auditors, and tax collectors regularly charge fees for services that they provide. Currently, under state law, they are allowed to charge $1 for the preparation of a certificate of payment showing that taxes have been paid on a property. This fee, set in state statute, has not been adjusted since 1947. AB 820 would allow the fee to be set at the local level based on the principle of cost recovery. Government Code 54986 establishes a process for local boards of supervisors to set county-based fees. Most requests for certificates of payment are simple, and the cost recovery method would probably lead to a minimal charge. It, I believe, is critical to give local governments the flexibility to charge for actual costs for optional services. Doing so means that not all taxpayers are forced to subsidize the service that an individual taxpayer is receiving. This bill, AB 820, is simple in its context. It says that rather than the state setting what the fee would be, and currently a fee that hasn't been adjusted since 1947, that the fees would be set on a cost recovery basis at the local level. And I would urge an aye vote.
Great, thank you. Witnesses in support? We have a motion and a second. Would you still like to testify?
Cynthia Gibbs, Assistant Tax Collector, Sacramento County. I would like to explain that this does not impact your average taxpayer who is wanting just proof of their taxes being paid. This is the actual tax certificate normally used for some form of a court action or for a subdivision development map act. It is not your average person who is coming in wanting a proof of payment. These certificates, which are needed to be prepared, do take time in their preparation. Some require research, especially with probate court or adverse possession cases requiring sometimes 5 years worth of tax paid certificates to be provided. So we do ask that you please allow it to be the cap to be lifted.
Thank you.
Karen Lang, again, last bill today, I promise. California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors. This has been a long-standing issue. We finally got an author. We really appreciate him taking it on, and we ask for your aye vote. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, members, Jean Hurst here on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. Also today for the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, urging your aye vote.
Thank you.
Michael Radigan on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, Santa Clara County, in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? How about opposition? See none. Any comments? Ms. Harkey?
These are probably for maybe the treasurer or the county assessor. What is the average cost for performing this job? What are we talking about?
I did do a time study when we obtained an author, and we were averaging about $13 to $15 for the actual cost. And that was the time to be able to type it, research it, type it, sign it, make it an official document.
Okay, and if somebody comes in and needs to really dig back, that's an unusual circumstance?
Probate court is usually just a slam dunk. The adverse possessions, they are required to have 5 years worth of tax records and proof of payment researched for an adverse possession. Subdivision developments are also relatively easy unless you're looking at a large volume of properties.
Okay, and if for an adverse possession, what's the typical, what would be your ballpark range of charges?
What we would do is look at each one for each year, and you'd probably be looking at the average of the $15 per each year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Bell?
Now that we have Prop 26, it seems to me that what we ought to do is, this is just a general comment, not specifically related to your bill, but it seems to me that what we ought to do is we ought to have a bill that just says we don't have Xerox fees in state statutes, so that we can, because they do have that constitutional provision about you can only charge a reasonable cost, so we could have that be the rule in accordance with Prop 26, and then let the counties charge their reasonable costs for their various services they provide to the public, and not waste the legislators' time, readjusting all the fees or changing the fees and so forth. I think that's something worth looking into.
Sure, absolutely.
How many fees are in statute? There's a lot of fees that are in statute. Why should we have to waste our time periodically changing these minor fees that people charge for various things?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe CSAC will want to take that on this year. Where's CSAC? Any other comments from the dais? Seeing none, would you like to close?
Respectfully urge an aye vote.
Great, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Motion is due pass. Perea?
Aye.
Perea, aye. Donnelly?
No.
Donnelly, no. Bell? Bell, aye. Calderon? Calderon, aye. Cedillo? Fuentes? Fuentes, aye. Gordon?
Aye.
Gordon, aye. Harkey? Harkey not voting. Nestande?
Bill is out. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, next we have item number 9, Assemblymember Shajian, AB 1030. And this deals with cigarette and tobacco taxes penalties.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members of the committee, I'm pleased to present AB 1030, a bill that will grant the Board of Equalization the ability to seize and sell tobacco products of licensed distributors who illegally sell untaxed tobacco products. An investigation in 2008 exposed the widespread tax evasion among the tobacco distributors in California. The illegal sale and distribution of untaxed tobacco products is costing the state millions in lost tax revenue. Under current law, the Board of Equalization has the power to seize and sell the tobacco products of unlicensed distributors that sell non-tax tobacco products, but does not grant the same power when dealing with licensed distributors. Earlier today, I received amendments from the Board of Equalization that will address the concerns brought up in the committee analysis, and I am committed to working with the Board, committee staff, and the sponsors as we move forward with these technical amendments while the bill is on suspense. With me today to provide additional information is Mr. Dennis Loper with the California Distributors Association.
Mr. Chairman and members, Dennis Loper for the California Distributors Association. AB 71, which this bill amends, the sections that were adopted in that was a comprehensive bill on administration of tobacco taxes. In its first year, it raised revenue by over $120 million without any change in the tax, just in enforcement mechanisms. This bill is to clean up an unforeseen error where licensed distributors with very smart people can get around the law and continue to operate when they haven't been paying the appropriate tax. It was never foreseen, and we ask for, I understand it's going to suspense, but I vote at the end of suspense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition? See none. Any comments from my colleagues? All right. Would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Did we have one?
Yeah, I have a concern which you may be addressing in your amendments with the seizure of the property and, defining exactly how that's done so it doesn't have a broad-based legal interpretation. Because I am concerned with seized property prior to a fair hearing or a court.
It is part of the amendment, yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed that. It might be related to the question I wanted to ask. So would the distributor have then the ability to challenge the decision? There's a due process piece of this? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. No other questions. This is a suspense item, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it. Next, we have item number 3. I believe Mr. Blumenfield is presenting on behalf of the speaker, AB 624. He's not here, so we will go ahead and move on to the next one, item number 8, Wykowski, Assemblymember Wykowski, AB 1009. He's not here. Mr. Fuentes, you're up. AB 152, Food Banks, Grants, Voluntary Contributions, Income Tax Credits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, I do recognize that this bill is slated for suspense, but thank you for your attention. A recent Gallup poll has shown that California is home to the 2 hungriest metropolitan areas in the country, Fresno and Riverside, San Bernardino. In those 2 communities, over 1/4 of the population has trouble providing enough food for themselves and their families. Unfortunately, these are not the only communities in California on this list. Bakersfield and my own district in Los Angeles also share the dubious distinction of having among the highest rates of hunger in the nation. Today, nearly 7 million, or 20% of Californians, report that they are unable to afford the food that they need. There is a particular need amongst seniors and working parents whose budgets for food are squeezed by the economic downturn. With so many people in need, food banks across the state are seeing an unprecedented increase in requests. You have before you a bill that is designed to help families put healthy food on their tables by increasing the amount of fresh fruits and vegetables available at the state's food banks by directly connecting California's farmers with their local food banks. This bill has 3 primary components. First, it allows contributions from the state or federal government to our state emergency food assistance program for the purchase of California-grown and produced food. This will allow California food banks to purchase and distribute a greater number of healthy food items like fruits and vegetables to disadvantaged Californians. It also provides a tax credit to California farmers for the cost of fresh fruits and vegetables donated to California food banks. And lastly, it works to remove the unnecessary administrative barriers for obesity prevention programs at the state level by providing the state's Department of Public Health granting authority for these programs. These are federal funds that the state could lose if they aren't able to get them out to the local community in a timely manner. As I mentioned at the beginning of my opening, our state is home to the 2 hungriest cities in the nation. California, the state that feeds this nation and much of the world, and we can't even feed some of our own constituents. We have a chance to do something about this today, Mr. Chair, or as this bill moves through your suspense file. And with me, I have 2 witnesses here to testify on behalf of the measure.
Great. Witnesses support, if you can keep it to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Andy Souza, CEO of the Community Food Bank serving Fresno, which is one of the communities that was mentioned by Assemblymember Fuentes. We currently have the highest food hardship rate in the nation, 27.2% of our population. That's up about 3% from last year. About 30,000 more people are now hungry, and that is about 11,000 children are going without food. We know that it's reaching deep into the neighborhoods of our community. I know one elementary school in particular, Eaton Elementary School, which is Member Prey will be familiar with, went from 15% on free and reduced meals in 2008 to 63% this year. So it is reaching throughout all of our community. You had a long discussion earlier today about the impact of obesity. One of the things we're seeing in Fresno County is our childhood obesity rate is 10% higher than the statewide average. That's in addition to the fact that we have the hungriest community. And the reason we see that is because when you're on limited food dollars, you're not able to buy fresh produce or lean meats. You're forced to buy others. And an example that I've shared is I recently went to the grocery store, took $7 worth of produce, 3 apples, 2 heads of broccoli, and a bag of carrots. But for that same $7, I could buy a 45-ounce package of Golden Puff sugar cereal. I could buy 24 packs of Top Ramen noodles and a loaf of white bread. So when the families that we serve are in crisis and they've got $7 to get to the end of the week, the produce just isn't obtainable. That's why we are the largest provider of produce to many of the families that we serve. So while it doesn't have probably the impact that the sugar drinks that you heard earlier, it's imperative for us to get that into our communities. Last year, we distributed about 9 million pounds of produce. Based on the surveys we've seen, we could probably need to get that to about 20 million pounds. This won't get us all the way there, but it would certainly be a big step in that direction. And so because of all those factors, we would urge support of AB 152. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Richard Romanger. We have a family farm on which we grow tomatoes in addition to alfalfa, other grains, and oilseed crops on the west side of the Sacramento Valley in Yolo County, just about 30 miles west of here. And I'm here to ask for your support for AB 152, which will help struggling families gain greater access to fresh and healthy food grown by California growers. As growers, we want to do our part to assist low-income Californians to have a healthy diet by eating more fruits and vegetables. But this can often be more of a challenge than you might think because of fluctuating food prices combined with the costs of labor, storage, shipping. They create tight operating margins that often make it difficult to donate our products. So as you know, AB 152 would increase access to healthy California-grown foods to less fortunate Californians by investing in a tax credit for California growers who donate healthy produce like fresh fruits and vegetables to California food banks. And at a future time when funds are available, the State Emergency Food Assistance Program will allow food banks to purchase California-grown food from growers like us. The bill also urges state agencies to investigate and apply for federal funds to promote healthy eating and prevent obesity. And those funds could then go to food banks to purchase healthy foods to distribute to needy families. The 10% tax credit would go to California growers for a part of the cost of fresh fruits and vegetables donated to California food banks. This tax incentive will allow growers to use a minimum state investment to cover some of the operating costs and therefore donate significant amounts of fresh produce to California food banks. This is not a boon to California growers, and we're not asking for a handout from the state. But I believe that the tax credit will provide enough investment to convince more growers to donate more produce to food banks and to get it in the hands of those who need it most. AB 152 makes a lot of sense to me during these tough economic times because it provides a win-win-win for California food banks, the people they serve, and for California growers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly McKechnie on behalf of Western Growers. Our members grow, pack, and ship over half the nation's fresh produce, and we're in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in support? How about opposition? See none. Any questions? Ms. Harkey?
I'm sorry you have to comment, but I really like this bill. What I would really like to see is that instead of implementing other programs, some of the other programs I've heard about in the schools, is that we actually teach kids how to grow something and they might eat it. I seriously, I mean, you know how they like to, when they have a part in something, they will eat it. They'll eat a tomato or something else. I really think that this is a very worthy program, and I look forward to seeing it move forward, and I'd like to be added as a co-author if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Would you like to close?
I would briefly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to sort of thank the witnesses for testifying today, but in particular, Mr. Rominger. Aside from being a fourth-generation Yolo County California farmer. He's also the former secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture and a former deputy secretary at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. from 1993 to 2001. So I think there's a very good stamp of approval to, I think, this modest measure, which aims to help farmers harvest food that otherwise would rot in their fields and gives them the financial assistance that they need to get the food to those who need it the most. And so I just thank you for your indulgence and urge your strong consideration as this measure finds its way onto your suspense file, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuentes. If I could just say I, too, like this bill a lot. I think it's a great bill. Of course, we will be moving it to suspense, and we'll have to look at this bill and weigh it in relation to all the other tax credit bills that we will be hearing as a committee. But I think your smartest move today was bringing Mr. Souza here today. For those of you for my colleagues, Mr. Souza was city manager of Fresno when I was on the city council there. And
we sparred our...
I won't hold any of those past against you today. No, I'll just say, Mr. Souza, it's good to see a friend from home here. Glad you're here advocating on behalf of a very good bill, and you teamed up with a good author over here. So
we aim to please, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, before we move on to Mr. Blumenfield, I would like to call for a roll call vote on our suspense item number 11. We do have some amendments. The action here, let me read these. The action is do pass with amendments to reinstate the provisions that would, upon the enactment of authorizing federal legislation, impose a use tax collection obligation on retailers that solicit orders by mail. So, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is due pass as amended to appropriations. Perea?
Aye.
Perea, aye. Donnelly?
No.
Donnelly, no. Bell? Bell, aye. Calderon? Calderon, aye. Cedillo? Fuentes? Aye. Fuentes, aye. Gordon? Harkey? Harkey, no. Nestande? Nestande not voting. The bill is on call.
The bill is on call. Now we will move on to Assemblymember Blumenfield, item number 3, AB 624, on behalf of the Speaker. Let's see here, where are we? Regarding California Organized Investment Network. Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. Yes, as you mentioned, this is the Speaker's bill. I'm a principal co-author of it, but I'm here to present it on his behalf. AB 624 extends until January 1st, 2017, the sunset date for the California Organized Investment Networks, or COIN, California Financial Development Institution Tax Program. So it's a mouthful, but basically it's a public-private partnership between the insurance companies and the Department of Insurance that's been working very well. It's administered by the California Department of Insurance. What the bill also does, in addition to extending this very successful program, it requires the insurance commissioner to establish a COIN advisory board to provide recommendations on how best to increase insurance industry investment in community development projects in underserved communities. The COIN program serves as a liaison between insurers seeking investment opportunities and the community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, of which we have a very successful one in the San Fernando Valley, that are seeking investment capital for different projects. Annually, the California Department of Insurance allocates $2 million for this tax credit, and it in turn supports $10 million in community development investments. The CDFIs play a vital role in matching this funding with tax credit eligible projects in economically disadvantaged communities. The California Department of Insurance is here in support and to answer technical questions on this bill, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Great, thank you. Are there any witnesses in support?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Perea and members. Michael Martinez, Deputy Commissioner for Legislation at the California Department of Insurance, and wanted to say that sincere pleasure to be here to say that we are in strong support of this bill, and we serve as the sponsor, and that it is a really good program. It's the first of its kind in the nation. It really is a vital tool, one vital tool to help revitalize communities. We do believe that this, we do strongly believe in extending the sunset date for this program because it really does, again, provide much needed capital to underserved communities. It has created a lot from 6 child care centers. It provides loans to churches and Habitat for Humanity construct affordable homes, water hookups in small rural communities. It really provides a lot of ability for bricks and mortar to be created throughout the state. One last thing is that we do believe that community development investments such as this are sound business sense policies, and we'd like to have the bill move forward today. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Seeing none, opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Michael Gunning with the Personal Insurance Federation, here in a very unique position that we're extremely supportive of the tax credit. In fact, as a former director of the COIN program, was very involved and instrumental in the creation of this legislation. And it's important to see these types of institutions go on and flourish. What we are opposed to is the creation of the advisory board, however. This is the same department that's approached the legislature for additional funding for personnel. We think the advisory board creates an expense that's not necessary because the commissioner has existing authority to call the advisory board together. In fact, that's what we did when I was in the department. So we think that portion of the bill is unnecessary and would encourage you to pull that section out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, Mr. Fuentes?
Just a question for the author on the bill. I am also a big fan of the program, and I'm glad that you mentioned, Mr. Blumenfield, the CDFIs, because we know sort of the strength on how they operate, in particular in the San Fernando Valley with the Valley Economic Development Corporation. I had the sort of distinction of working with them at the outset when then Assemblymember Cardenas, who one of the two members before me in this capacity, asked me to participate with them as they were developing their program. I guess the concern that I've got is if you are going to add another layer, the advisory committee, how much sort of influence will they have potentially over the VEDCs or the CDFIs in this case to make sure that they don't sort of hamstring how the money flows? Because I think, at least for the San Fernando Valley with VEDC in the driver's seat, the program has worked very well as a CDFI. Any ideas as to how cemented the author is to that particular part of the bill?
Well, I'll actually defer to the Insurance Commissioner's office on that. I mean, it's my understanding, though, that they're making recommendations on investments, but they're not controlling those investments, so that our VEDC project would still be free to do what they want. But please, Insurance Commissioner.
And I guess before I sort of let you answer that, I guess that's exactly my chief concern. I mean, VEDC is doing a very good job. The Valley Economic Development Corporation is doing a very good job as a financial, as a CDFI on its own. And I'm just wondering if we sort of begin to hamstring the flow of money based on recommendations that are made at the advisory committee level, that it's a statewide sort of purview versus a sort of local authority like the Valley Economic Development Corporation. And if you can help me understand that through the context of why we would add an advisory committee to this program. Since 1997, it seems like the program has operated very well without an advisory committee.
Thank you very much. Michael Martinez for the Department of Insurance. A few components, and I will actually have Chris Schultz, he's Deputy Commissioner for Community Relations and Programs, who can answer a bit more on just the day-to-day, if you will. But I want to answer, I saw sort of three questions, and they were all good. The first part is in the bill. The advisory board, it's created, quote, to increase the level of insurance industry capital in safe and sound investments while providing fair returns to investors and social benefits to underserved communities. We believe that it provides sort of an advisory capacity to the staff to in turn oversee as these loan applications or as these applications come in, the interest that they're on a first come first served basis as dictated in state law. And actually I'll let Chris Schultz with the department provide any further there, and then I can talk about the need for having the advisory board in state statute.
Chris Schultz with the California Department of Insurance. To answer the question, there has been an informal advisory committee of the commissioners. My understanding is from approximately 1997 to 2007, that advisory board has not met in several years. I think it's the speaker's interest that there be an advisory board watching this program and overseeing it on a day-to-day basis, which makes some amount of sense. The advisory board has acted in an advisory capacity, recommending kind of programmatic rules and regulations, but not dictating specific investments. So in the case of your district, if that CDFI wanted to go out and secure an investment, it doesn't need to be blessed by the advisory board, overseen by the advisory board. It just provides overall guidance to the program.
And I guess that's a concern that I've got. I mean, I have a real sort of deference for local and regional control, and while there might be some sort of statewide applications where an advisory committee may want to sort of look at suggestions, we have a very capable, I'm a little defensive only because we got a very capable organization in the San Fernando Valley that is sort of administering those monies, and I think in a very effective way, and if they have to, as a matter of an advisory committee's recommendations, have to deal with recommendations at the statewide level when we can informally and have the authority to informally sort of listen to those recommendations, why would we want the force of statute behind them? I'm not saying that I'm not going to support the bill. I think it's a tremendous program, but I think it's working very well in the San Fernando Valley and would urge the principal co-author to sort of consider all that as you're navigating the bill through the committee's suspense file.
Yeah, and just so you know, it's my understanding on this. Part of the problem is the program is so underutilized, and the advisory board would be out there with legislative members on there, spurring them forward to say, in areas that are not as fortunate as our area in the San Fernando Valley, where we have such a solid organization doing it, that could be saying, hey, what about this investment over here in this underserved community? Because there are, besides our community, there are some other underserved communities out there.
I only care about mine.
But
it seems to be working very well.
But I don't.
And you care about Fresno too, right?
Yeah, and Fresno, that's correct, Mr. Chair. I apologize for the omission.
But it's my understanding that this isn't going to change the autonomy in any way of our VEDC or any of the local groups. It's just going to be there to try to advise the insurance commissioner on how he could spur and work with the insurance industry to get more investments around the state.
Thank you. Mr. Nastani?
Can I just follow up on that same point? Then I still didn't get the answer to what's the point of the board then? If you can do that right now in the capacity that Mr. Fuentes is talking about, I don't see the need for the board then. And then secondly, I have the same concern that you might then be directing something that's contrary to that local agency's wishes. And more to the point, having legislators on that board that have parochial interests, they might be influencing those decisions based on those parochial interests as opposed to a broader concept. In response, I'd like to say I still don't hear the good answer of why we need this board right now, as opposed to
transparency is one of the key reasons, is so that we know who's advising, who's out there, and that it's consistent year in and year out. We have a very solid insurance commissioner right now, who may get this exact grouping of people together, but that may not always be the case. And so this is a program that transcends any one administration, any one group. So the idea of having transparency, having a set group of advisors, is something the insurance commissioner thinks would be very helpful.
Sorry, Mr. Blumenfeld, but is there evidence that that's not been the case, I guess?
Yeah, for one thing, they haven't met. The previous insurance commissioner didn't think it was worth his time, so he didn't have any meetings in 3 years?
And the current commissioner could certainly put forth his own program then to do that. If he didn't think the past commissioner was doing a good job, he should step up and do that then, I guess.
And certainly he has. He's just finished. He has just completed his first 100 days in office, and he's been focused on certainly many things of importance to California consumers. And the thing here is that there is a theme, one theme of many with this bill is wanting to reinvigorate this program. As what Assemblyman Blumenfield had said, that this advisory board has not met since 1997. It's unfortunate. And under this commissioner, we do believe that in codifying the advisory board and put in state statute would serve to reinvigorate this program. And we feel this is a component. We tried under the informal advisory board. Perhaps it certainly, at least under this commissioner, didn't feel it worked. And so we want to be able to have it under state statute. And we certainly, I think it's the intent is not to create this formalized statutory advisory board, not to trump, local. We do believe that, and having local CDFIs in turn receive these grants, that we do want to be able to have that local control. So I don't think it's a desire to want to go in that direction, at least with this advisory board.
And I appreciate that response, but I'm just concerned of unintended consequences that if you put legislators on that board, the intent right now may not be to override their decisions or direct it in any way, but having legislators sitting on that board, I think brings kind of a heavy hand to it and brings a different perspective, I guess.
Great, thank you. Assemblymember Harkey?
I appreciate Assemblymember Blumenfeld bringing this forward. I think that I know it's not. I understand it's not his bill. I would like to express these same concerns. And unfortunately, when I see more and more layers, I think we get less and less transparent. And I think the best transparency is at the local level where the people are concerned. So I would like to see you recommend to the office something about eliminating that section and actually just bringing the 5-year forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Would you like to respond to anything that was just said, or you?
Me or
either?
Either.
Well, you're looking at me like you wanted to respond from the Insurance Commission's office.
I mean, I just want to just Deborah Doty from the Speaker's office conveyed to me that there is the California State Allocation Board is another entity that in which state legislators do sit on that board, and that obviously wanting to slight distinction insofar that they do provide oversight on grant dispersion. But I guess to say that in wanting to further formalize this board, we felt that at least in having representatives of the state legislature and their designees provides that capacity to advise the insurance commissioner, who also would sit on this board as well.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll just end. Any other comments, questions? I'll just end by just echoing similar concerns. Just, I'd like to know a little bit more about the advisory board. Very supportive of the bill. Think it's a good thing. Just would like to know a little bit more, and I think it's just the same concern. I just want to make sure that our CDFIs in Fresno and our folks that are really, being very proactive in many ways. I just want to make sure that there's not going to be this, this statewide board that's all of a sudden going to kind of, stop things that they may be wanting to do. So the only concern, similar concern that others have, but otherwise, I mean, it's a very good bill. So having said that, would you like to close?
Thank you. Just to emphasize again, I mean, part of the issue here is that the board hasn't met since 1997. So the state's not getting the benefit of having this advisory board, and the codification of having some members on that board advise the insurance commissioner, as I understand it, is not designed in any way to limit the ability of the locals to make their decisions. Because I share the concern of all these boards, and my local, as Mr. Fuentes pointed out, we share the same area, has been very active and very good, and I'm convinced it's not going to be hurting them in the slightest bit. It's going to give the insurance commissioner the tools that he or she needs in the future, but it's also going to give the legislature the ability, a stronger ability, to spur this program on when it's not being used. It's being underutilized right now to the tune of about $1.5 billion, if I understand correctly, where a very large amount of the money is not being used. So that's the point of it, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Thank you for closing. There are no other comments. We'll move this to suspense. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks. We're on to our last item, item number 8 by Assemblymember Wajkowski, AB 1009. And this is an income tax credit, full-time employees. Mr. Wajkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for staying here. I'll be brief. In April of 2009, legislation was approved and signed into law, which allowed businesses with 20 or fewer employees to receive a tax credit of $3,000 if they had a net gain of one full-time employee starting January 1, 2009. The State Board of State Franchise Tax Board estimated that we set up a pool of $400 million, and they said by June of 2010, all this money is going to be gone because we're going to put people back to work, and employers are going to take advantage of this and hire folks. Well, unfortunately, that hasn't happened. As of January, we'd only used about 39.7 million of these dollars that are in the pool, and we just checked as of April 2nd, It's now up to 45.3, but it's an anemic pace that we're trying to get these new hires. So the bill very quickly would expand this 2009 tax credit to small, micro, disabled veterans, and disadvantaged businesses to help stimulate the economy and promote hiring in California. California's dominance in many economic areas is based in part on the significant role small businesses play in the state's $1.8 trillion economy. Now, businesses with less than 100 employees comprise more than 98.3% of all businesses and responsible for about 57.9% of the workers in the state. By expanding the credit to the small, micro, disabled veterans and disadvantaged businesses, it allows for a greater number of businesses. And these are all, I didn't make up these terms. I mean, the 20 employees is just something that the legislature decided to create. There's a micro business is 25 people. A small business is 100 people. Disabled veterans, I think people know what a disabled veteran, and the disadvantaged businesses, it's a federal standard. So these are terms that the business community is familiar with that can take advantage, hopefully take advantage of this and get Californians back to work. The bill will also stipulate that in order to receive the tax credit, an individual that was hired must have been unemployed for a period of 30 days prior to the hire. Now, the staff has suggested some amendments, potential amendments, and I'm willing to accept the amendments as proposed on the different lines if I need to go over that. These are tough economic times, and people are looking for the legislature and for the state of California to do something to create some incentive to hire unemployed individuals. And hopefully AB 1009 is the cost-effective way for the state to do that. And I have some associations and coalitions of people who are here. This is Lori Kammerer.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Kammerer. I'm here on behalf of the Coalition of Small and Disabled Veteran Businesses. We represent about 17,000 certified small businesses, disabled veteran businesses in California. We highly support this bill. We think that it gives small businesses, the mom and pops, the real small businesses where a lot of our members have 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. We think this bill would definitely help them, and we urge your support on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any in opposition? Seeing none, any comments, questions from the dais? Mr. Gordon.
Just a general comment. We've, I think this is the second bill we've had, maybe the third, dealing with, this tax credit program, which, as the author indicates, was originally funded at a fairly high level, but we've only used a very small amount. It would seem to me that maybe one of the things we can do is we move this bill with the others to suspense would be to look at, is there a way for these various bills to take a closer look at what is this the right approach? Is the approach around the prisoners, which is a previous bill Mr. Swanson had here, is that the right approach? Is there a combination? And maybe there's an opportunity here to craft this program in a way rather than picking off this small business or that micro business or this disabled vet or this prisoner, to take a look at the whole program. And is there a way to actually achieve what the legislature originally wanted to achieve in terms of getting Californians to work by providing these tax credits? The money is there. It's been allocated. We should, I think, find a better way to use it, perhaps, and maybe there's a way to do that as we bring these bills together off suspense at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm familiar with the bills that have to pick a number, 40 or 50. What I tried to do is, again, I didn't make up these terms. These are terms that are there, and I guess one of the things the committee could do is just lift the entire cap. Just say anybody, any business, a large corporation that has, Fortune 500, they could use the cap. I was just trying to take a little incremental step before.
Great. Mr. Keldron?
Yes, I like what you're doing with this bill because it did nothing but give money away when we passed it. Because it was 450 up to 450 million for hiring tax credits, but when you hire somebody at $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000, you know, the measly tax credit that we were providing, even I think it was $7,000 or $10,000, you know, it doesn't pencil out. So the only ones that were benefiting from that tax credit were the ones that were going to hire anyway. Right. So I like this idea of now going back and seeing how we can better accomplish the intent of the legislature in passing that tax credit in the first place, and that is putting people back to work. So I really like your thinking on this.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments? Would you like to close?
Please support my bill. That was please. I did say please first.
Now I have to, man.
With sugar on it.
That was the most convincing argument I've heard all day. It's great. Well, thank you. We will refer this to suspense, but Mr. Gordon, I think that's a good idea. There may, in fact, be a fourth bill that comes out that deals with this same pot, so it might be a good opportunity for us to blend them all and do something really great with it. So, thank you. Before we go, two quick things. Item 11, AB 155, is on call. Can you please call the absent members?
Cedillo. Gordon. Aye. Gordon, aye. The bill is out.
Bill is out. Thank you. And just one last announcement. Item number 5, AB 780. The author has waived his presentation, so that item will go straight to suspense. And seeing that there is no other business before us, meeting adjourned. Thank you.